Hello, my name is Mark Killian. I'm the Director of the Arizona Department of Agriculture. My family has been involved in farming and ranching business in Arizona for over 100 years. This is a very rewarding but challenging business that requires all those who are involved in the day-to-day operations to be very cautious and aware of the hazards of this occupation. Worker safety is of the utmost importance, and training our workers is an integral part of making sure we have safe operations on our farms and ranches.
As agriculture employers, we are responsible for providing workers and handlers like you with information and protections designed to reduce work-related pesticide exposures and illnesses. This includes ensuring workers and handlers are trained in pesticide safety. You must receive this training on an annual basis before you enter a treated area or handle pesticides. This video will explain what you need to know about pesticide safety to keep you and your family safe. Remember, safety is everyone's responsibility. It is important that you follow these instructions while performing your daily duties. Pay close attention to this video and the presenter, and ask questions if you are not sure of a topic or need clarification. When you go to work each day, it's important that you wear the appropriate clothing to protect your body from pesticide residue. This includes long sleeve shirts, long pants, socks and sturdy shoes, and a hat that shades your head if it's hot. At the beginning of your workday, your employer must provide pesticide safety and application and hazard information. You should check on what pesticides were recently applied to the areas you will be entering. Your employer must ensure that you have been informed of the location of the central posting site where the following information must be displayed. Information on pesticides applied during the last 30 days, plus the Restricted Entry Interval Period, or REI. This must include information on the application, hazard information, and notification to workers of restrictions during applications and restrictions to the area that have been treated. The EPA Pesticide Safety Poster. This poster has information and recommendations on how to keep you and your family from becoming ill or injured from pesticides. It must also be posted at the decontamination site when 11 or more workers are present. The address and telephone number to the nearest operating emergency medical facility. Your employer is required to inform you on how and when to get emergency medical care. The telephone number to the Arizona Pesticide Hotline. Safety data sheets, or SDS, for all pesticides that are used and that you may come in contact with on the agricultural establishment where you work. The SDS provides information about hazards, emergency medical treatment, and other information about pesticides. You must have access to SDS during normal working hours. If you are employed by a labor contractor in Arizona, he or she must provide the specific location of the central posting sites for each agricultural establishment where you will be working. Your employer is required to maintain pesticide application records and safety data sheets for 2 years. These records must be made available to you upon oral or written request. You may designate a representative to request on your behalf pesticide application and hazard information. This designation must be done in writing and must be signed by you. The request must include a statement of designation, the identity of the designated representative, as well as details about the specific request. Your employer must provide this information to you within 15 days of the request. You may find that specific fields or enclosed production areas are posted with this sign. This sign is required to be posted when certain pesticides are applied. It must also be posted at an enclosed production area when a pesticide with an REI of at least 4 hours has been applied. If you see this sign, do not enter the area. There are situations where it's necessary and permissible to enter a work area where the REI is in effect. This is known as early entry. The area may or may not be posted. You must be at least 18 years of age before your employer can direct you to enter to work in an area where the REI is in effect. Also, your employer must provide you with specific information and the appropriate personal protective equipment, or PPE, required by the label. You must never enter a field that is posted without having been informed of specific early entry information and procedures. If you find postings at a field, never remove them yourself. Contact your employer or the applicator, as only they can remove postings. They will let you know if it's safe to enter. Pesticides come in a variety of forms, such as liquids, sprays, powders, granules, and gases. There are 4 routes through which pesticides can enter your body. Exposure through your skin is the most common, as skin is the largest organ on your body. Pesticides can also enter your body through your eyes, nose, and mouth. For example, when you brush past a plant that has been sprayed, pesticide residue may get on your clothes or skin. You may also come in contact with pesticide residue in or on the soil or water when weeding, thinning, irrigating, or harvesting. PPE could have pesticide residue on it and cause contamination if you do not remove it correctly. The equipment we use every day, such as tractors, fumigation, and application equipment, can also be a source of pesticide contamination if it is not decontaminated properly. If you are a handler or asked to do early entry work, your employer is required to provide, clean, maintain, store, and ensure proper use of all required PPE. Pesticides may also drift through the air from nearby applications. Your employer and the applicators must take every precaution to ensure spray will not contact people. Spray is carefully calculated so the product does not go outside the application area. Also, your employer and the applicator must keep workers out of the area directly surrounding the application equipment. This area is called the Application Exclusion Zone, or AEZ, and is between 25 to 100 feet surrounding the application equipment. Your employer will tell you about areas where application is in progress, and you should always try to avoid these areas. Also, know that the wind speed and direction can change at any time, increasing the potential for pesticide drift. The applicator or handler making the application must suspend the application if any worker or other person other than a trained and equipped handler is in the AEZ. If you have been contaminated by a pesticide, acute pesticide poisoning symptoms may appear within 24 hours of exposure. They may include rash, headache, nausea, and eye irritation. Sensitization causes you to develop an allergic reaction and will show up as a rash, headache, or respiratory problems like wheezing and shortness of breath when exposed to the pesticides you are sensitive to. Chronic symptoms are experienced after weeks, months, or even years of repeated exposure and can result in a long-term illness such as cancer, sterility, or birth defects.
Heat-related illness and pesticide poisoning may seem very similar. Both can cause sweating, headache, and fatigue, but heat-related illness will cause a dry mouth, no tears, spit, a fast pulse unless the person has fainted, nausea, dilated pupils, and fainting from which they revive fairly quickly. Pesticide poisoning symptoms are the opposite, with excess salivation, tears, nausea, and diarrhea, possible small pupils, and a coma from which you have trouble reviving them. Remember, dry for heat exhaustion and wet for pesticide poisoning. Both conditions can depress the central nervous system, create loss of coordination and confusion. It's very important that you recognize the difference between these conditions, as it will dictate how the patient is treated. Heat-related illness can often be treated by removing the worker to the shade to rest and have them drink plenty of water. In severe cases of heat-related illness, a worker should seek medical treatment. If pesticide poisoning is suspected, the worker should immediately seek medical treatment.
Employers must provide decontamination supplies for workers and handlers to use to wash within 1/4 mile of the worksite. The supplies must include water, soap, and single-use towels for routine washing and emergency decontamination. At least 1 gallon of decontamination water must be available to you, as a worker, at the start of your workday. Workers should routinely wash their hands to remove pesticide residue and prevent pesticide exposure. You must wash your hands before you start work, before and after eating, drinking, chewing gum, or using tobacco, and before and after using the toilet. Your groin area has the fastest rate of absorption on your body, closely followed by under your arms, your face, and scalp. If you wash your hands often, you will transfer less pesticide residue from your hands onto other parts of your body and will reduce your risk of exposure and potential for illness. Should you or another worker come into contact with pesticides or pesticide residue, it's important to wash or decontaminate using the decontamination supplies as soon as possible and inform your supervisor or employer. A clean lake or stream can be used to wash immediately if it is closer than the decontamination supplies. Follow up as soon as possible with a shower using soap and water, wash your hair with shampoo, and put on clean clothes. If swallowed, look up the chemical in the safety data sheets at the central location or online if a smartphone is available, and follow the first aid instructions. Do not induce vomiting unless the SDS specifically tells you to. If a person has inhaled pesticides and is overcome, they should move to fresh air. If the eyes have been contaminated, flush them gently with clean water for at least 15 minutes. Your employer must provide emergency assistance if there is reason to believe you or another employee has been exposed to pesticides on the job. If the exposure is serious or at the injured worker's request, emergency assistance must be immediately provided by transporting the worker to the nearest operating medical facility or calling 911. Your employer must also provide specific information about the pesticide and exposure to the medical provider. When returning home after work, make sure you remove your work shoes before entering your home and place them outside the home, not with the family shoes. Wash up, shower and wash your hair with shampoo, and change into clean clothes before coming into contact with family or friends. Work clothes can have pesticide residues on them. These clothes should be washed separately from the family clothes using hot water and soap. It's important that you wear clean clothes to work each day as to not recontaminate yourself or others with pesticide residue. Children and pregnant women are especially susceptible to harm from pesticide exposure. Keep your family, especially children and pregnant women, away from pesticide-treated areas or contaminated clothing, and never take home pesticides or pesticide containers used at work. Pesticides that remain in those containers can make you or your family sick.
If you have any knowledge of suspected pesticide use violations, you should report them. In Arizona, you can report it anonymously to the Arizona Department of Agriculture's pesticide hotline, 1-800-423-8876. Or, if you're working on an Indian reservation, report them to the tribal agency responsible for pesticide enforcement. You can find the phone numbers on the EPA pesticide safety poster located at the farm's central posting location. Agriculture employers are prohibited from intimidating, threatening, coercing, or discriminating against any worker or handler because they are complying with or attempting to comply with the requirements of the Pesticide Worker Protection Rule. They provided, cause to be provided, or are about to provide information to the employer or the pesticide regulatory agency regarding conduct that the employee reasonably believes violates the Pesticide Worker Protection Rule. Or they made a complaint, testified, assisted, or participated in any manner in an investigation, proceeding, or hearing concerning compliance with this rule. Remember, if your employer asks you to mix, load, or apply a pesticide, or asks you to help another worker mix, load, or apply a pesticide, you must be at least 18 years old and be trained as a pesticide handler.
Following label instructions will prevent self-injury, protect other employees, and the environment. Your employer is responsible for providing to you specific information about pesticide use and labeling information. The pesticide handler and their employer are jointly responsible for use according to the pesticide labeling directions, the application exclusion zone requirements, and for the handler wearing the PPE required by the label. On each label, you will find the brand name, manufacturer, chemical name, and common name. You will also find the EPA registration number. This is the number you want to use when there is a need to provide medical personnel with information on the pesticide involved. The label also includes the cautionary signal word. The pesticides with the highest potential acute toxicity will always have the word danger on the label. If the pesticide is highly toxic if it is ingested, inhaled, or absorbed through the skin, the word poison, accompanied by a skull and crossbones, will appear on the label along with danger. Pesticides that are moderately toxic will always have the word warning on the label. The least toxic pesticides will either have the word caution or no signal word on the label. Remember, though, that even these pesticides can harm you if they are used carelessly, causing exposure. The label lists the statement of practical treatment, precautionary statements, and the personal protective equipment that must be used, or PPE. Also on the label are the environmental hazard statement and restricted entry interval information. And lastly, the label provides directions for use, type of formulation, storage, and disposal directions. As a pesticide handler, you should familiarize yourself with all this information prior to using the product, and follow the manufacturer's and your employer's directions to ensure safe handling of the product. Reading and understanding the label is important. The pesticide label is more than just a piece of paper. It's a legal document recognized by courts of law. This is why we say the label is the law. The format of labels differs between manufacturers. You must read the label before you use a pesticide. This includes mixing and loading, and when you are finished using the pesticide, to learn about storage and disposal. Pesticide manufacturers are required to provide certain information on the label. The information includes brand name or trade name of the product, the EPA registration number, ingredient statement, percentage or amount of active ingredients by weight, net contents of the container, and name and address of the manufacturer. Look for the precautionary statements on the label. In this section, you will find statements such as hazards to humans and domestic animals. It explains what the dangers are if the product comes into contact with persons. It will also list what personal protective equipment, PPE, is required for applicators and other handlers. Look for the Directions for Use section on the label for instructions on how to properly apply the pesticide in a safe manner. Directions for Use instruct the applicator how to properly apply the pesticide and achieve the best results. This section provides information such as the rate of application, the sites the product is intended to protect, for example, aquatic, non-crop sites, wildlife habitat areas, crop sites, greenhouses, etc. It also describes which pests it controls, mixing directions, and other specific directions related to applying the pesticide. Pesticides applied on agricultural establishments must be for agricultural use. Look for the Agricultural Use Requirements box on the label. This section of the label will contain information on the restricted entry interval, REI, and how the employer must notify workers of areas under an REI. Depending on the length of the REI and the label requirements, the employer may have to post the treated area with warning signs for worker notification. Look for the Environmental Hazard Statement. This section of the label details possible hazards to the environment, including soil, water, air, wildlife, fish, and non-target plants. There may be special warning statements like, "This product is highly toxic to bees," "Do not contaminate water when disposing of equipment wash waters," and "Do not allow drift to contact non-target plants or trees." Finally, be sure to read the Storage and Disposal Statement. Each pesticide label has general storage and disposal instructions. Keep pesticides stored in a secure location and in the original containers. When disposing of pesticide containers, triple or pressure rinse and puncture to avoid reuse. Two very common statements found on the label under this section are, "Do not contaminate water, food, or feed by storage or disposal," and "Store in original containers only." Employers must provide you with the information and PPE that must be used to reduce work-related pesticide exposures and illness. They must also make sure that you use PPE properly and that PPE is cleaned, stored, or disposed of properly. PPE must be inspected for damage before each use. Different items of PPE include gloves. Make sure they fit and that your sleeves are tucked under the cuffs unless working overhead. There are many different types of gloves. Make sure you choose the ones best suited to the job you are about to do and that are required by the label. When done, pull gloves off by the cuff, turning them inside out to prevent further contamination by the glove itself. Goggles or safety glasses. At times, you may also use a face shield. Coveralls, a Tyvek suit, or an apron. Disposable coveralls or suits should be disposed of after the day's use. Like the gloves, they are best removed in a way that turns them inside out for safe disposal. Respirators. Some pesticide labels require handlers to wear respirators to protect themselves from breathing in pesticide vapor. There are many different types. Make sure the one you wear is appropriate for the job you are doing as stated in the product's label. Before using a respirator, your employer must make sure that you have a medical evaluation on file that states you are medically cleared to wear a respirator. Employers must also perform a fit test annually on each handler using a tight-fitting respirator and provide each handler training in the proper way to use their respirator. Wear work clothing that protects the body from pesticide residues, including long-sleeve shirts, long pants, socks, boots or sturdy shoes, and a hat or headscarf where needed. When cleaning up a spill, first make sure you are wearing the appropriate PPE for the substance spilled. Consult the SDS for specific cleanup instructions, including when to call the fire department. Then, follow the 3C program. Control the spill, contain the spill, and clean up the spill. Control the spill by stopping the source. Contain the spill by sprinkling an absorbent material, such as pet litter or fine sand, over the spilled material if it is a liquid, or lightly mist a powder or granular material. You can then spread the absorbent material over the area. Finally, clean up the spill by sweeping it up into a heavy-duty plastic bag. Never wash down the spill, as this will simply dilute and spread the chemical and could possibly contaminate drains and sewer systems. Mark the bag hazardous with the pesticide name and dispose of it appropriately. When transferring a pesticide to a secondary container for use during that application, the container is considered a service container. Never use a food or drink container, as the pesticide could later be consumed by mistake, causing severe injury or death. After transferring to an appropriate service container, affix a label with the following information: email address if possible and phone number of the applicator using the pesticide, brand or trade name of the pesticide, EPA registration number, name and percentage of the active ingredient, dilution, if any, in the service container, EPA assigned signal word from the label, and the phrase "keep out of the reach of children." When you transport pesticides, you are legally responsible for them. Examine all containers for leaks before loading and unloading. They are most safely transported in the bed of a truck protected from the weather, never in the passenger compartment of any vehicle. They should not be transported in the same compartment as food, animal feed, or clothing. It is important to make sure they are secure and safe from theft or tampering should you leave your vehicle. As a handler, your employer must provide decontamination supplies for routine washing and emergency decontamination, including 3 gallons of water per pesticide handler, soap, single-use towels, and a change of clothing. Certain pesticide labels also require eye protection, and handlers using those pesticides must have access to emergency eye flush water during mixing and loading and 1 pint of water immediately available during application. Make sure these supplies are available at the mix-load site or near the field. Before pesticides are applied, as a handler you must do the following: check wind direction and speed to prevent potential drift, check for nearby bodies of water, wildlife, and potential runoff, check for people in the vicinity. Handlers must not apply pesticides in a manner that results in contact with workers or other persons. When spraying pesticides, it is the employer's responsibility to keep workers and other people out of the application exclusion zone. It is the responsibility of the applicator or handler to stop spraying if there are people inside the AEZ. An applicator or handler can continue spraying once they ensure that the pesticide will not contact any people that are in the AEZ. It is important to recognize and prevent heat illnesses. When applying a pesticide in full PPE during hot weather, you must take occasional breaks to cool off and drink plenty of water to prevent becoming ill. There are 4 types of heat-related illnesses that you should watch for. Heat rash, also known as prickly heat, is skin irritation caused by sweat that does not evaporate from the skin. Heat rash is the most common problem in hot work environments. The symptoms are clusters of red bumps on skin that often appear on neck, upper chest, and folds of skin. The recommended first aid for heat rash is to try to work in a cooler, less humid environment when possible and keep the affected area dry. Heat cramps are caused by the loss of body salts and fluid during sweating. Low salt levels in muscles cause painful cramps. Tired muscles, those used for performing the work, are usually the ones most affected by cramps. Cramps may occur during or after working hours. The symptoms are muscle spasms and pain, usually in the abdomen, arms, or legs. The recommended first aid for heat cramps is to rest in a shady, cool area, drink water or other cool beverages, and wait a few hours before returning to strenuous work. Seek medical attention if cramps don't go away. Heat exhaustion is the body's response to loss of water and salt from heavy sweating. Signs include headache, nausea, dizziness, weakness, irritability, thirst, and heavy sweating. The symptoms are cool and moist skin, heavy sweating, headache, nausea or vomiting, dizziness, lightheadedness, weakness, thirst, irritability, and fast heartbeat. The recommended first aid for heat exhaustion is to sit or lie down in a cool, shady area, drink plenty of water or other cool beverages, and cool down with cold compresses or ice packs. A worker should be taken to a clinic or emergency room for medical evaluation or treatment if signs or symptoms worsen or do not improve within 60 minutes. He or she should not return to work that day. Heat stroke, the most serious form of heat-related illness, happens when the body becomes unable to regulate its core temperature. Sweating stops and the body can no longer rid itself of excess heat. Signs include confusion, loss of consciousness, and seizures. Heat stroke is a medical emergency that may result in death. Call 911 immediately. While waiting for emergency medical assistance, the worker should be placed in a shady, cool area, loosen and/or remove outer clothing, fan air on the worker, apply cold packs in armpits, wet the worker with cool water, apply ice packs, cool compresses, or ice if available, and provide fluids, preferably water, as soon as possible. Someone should stay with the worker until help arrives. When application is done for the day, all empty containers must be triple rinsed, punctured, and disposed of in an appropriate site. The handler must wear his PPE while cleaning the containers. Ask your supervisor where to put the rinsed containers for disposal or recycling. A handler is not done for the day until his PPE has been properly removed and decontaminated. All disposable PPE must be thrown away. Remove your PPE when you complete your handler tasks that required the PPE. First, wash gloves with soap and water, and while wearing the gloves, remove other PPE. Wash the gloves in soap and water again and remove them. If you are so instructed by your employer, clean the reusable PPE according to the manufacturer's instructions, being careful not to get residue on yourself. Disposable gloves and Tyvek suits must be removed in a manner avoiding contact with surfaces that may be contaminated. Reusable gloves and goggles or face masks must be washed with soap and water and returned to the appropriate storage cabinet. You must never take PPE home.
We want to thank you for taking time to review these most important safety points as it relates to pesticides and your use and working with them in the fields. Our goal is to keep you, your family, and community safe while you work and feed and clothe all of us. Thank you for your dedication and hard work.